Hello, I'm Toycat, and this is Serious Sunday, the sometimes weekly series I run on my channel that's kind of a podcast style thing that you can listen to while you play video games. Or you can do, anything you want. You can stare at the video, but the whole point of it is that it's some kind of a podcast style content that I like to do from time to time on this channel. I know it's not very regular, and I know it's called Serious Sunday, and it's going out on a Thursday, or it might even be on a different date to that, but this is something I'm doing as a replacement for a live stream, because every single Tuesday and Thursday, I like to live stream on this channel. Tuesday, I, play around with some different games. Thursday, I like to do some Minecraft streams, and I feel like because I try to do that as often as I can, but because I'm out of the country, I physically cannot, especially of time zones in New Zealand, and because of that, I figured let's do a little bit of a Toycat podcast so you can have something like a live stream that also gives you the opportunity to listen to Toycat and play your video games, which, by the way, if you haven't done that yet, before we get into anything else, I really want to recommend it right here. And again, this is against my interest because obviously if you watch the video instead of just listen to it, it's better for me as a channel, but I do want to say, if you haven't ever tried it, it's something where the first time I started playing, I think it was like COD Zombies in like 2010, and listening to podcasts, it just like, it clicked and it was great and it was wonderful. So yeah, give it a try if you haven't ever done it. Maybe you'll like it by the end. And if this is your first time listening to something while playing a game, send me a tweet afterwards because I'm genuinely curious. Like, I like recommending things to people, which links into what today's Serious Sunday, Thursday, Tuesday thing is all about, because it's going to be about being a good person. I wanted to talk about the kind of vague concept of what being a good person is, because it's been on my mind a lot recently, especially today. I just went to Five Guys. If you don't know, Five Guys is my favorite fast food chain in the UK, one of my favorite in the world, I would say, and basically, they're expanding super fast. They're one of the best, like, burger places, and the cool thing about them is they only spread by word of mouth, so I feel like I'm doing my bit and being like, I'm just going to tell everyone at every possible opportunity that Five Guys this, Five Guys that. So anyway, I went to Five Guys today, and I had a lot of, like, experiences along the way that made me think about what being a good person really is, because I saw a lot of people being kind of good. I saw a lot of people doing kind of minor annoying things, and I think the truth is that the longer you spend in public, the more you'll see good deeds, but also the more you'll see tiny annoying deeds that make you question things. So I want to go back to the original thing of like, so what is being a good person? Why doesn't everyone try to be a good person? Because I think that, if you just give people the vague question of like, do you think that you are a good person, or at least do you think that you want to be a good person? I think most people would respond with yes. There's a very small minority of people that would say no, either because of a technicality or because they're psychopaths or sociopaths or something like that. But I think most people really do want to be good people in the world. They want to help make the world a better place. But I think the reason that we don't have this overwhelming feeling that everyone else is out there trying to be good is because, what is a good person? A good person is someone who does good things, and then you have to raise the question, so what are good things? And that's where everyone has their own different opinions, because if we all had the same opinion of what are good things to do, then I think the world would be a really amazingly structured place, because it'd be like, right now, the person in need right now, we can pin it down, is Jerry, who lives in Charleston, South Carolina. He could do with a steak right now, and that steak would add the most happiness to the world, and therefore, everyone, let's work on this together, let's pitch in, and let's get Jerry a steak, and, as a world, we could all pay, a fraction of a cent, and then Jerry could have his steak. There's small things like that, well, if we could all coordinate some Magic Society bomb, we could all obviously do that sort of stuff, but the truth is everyone has different opinions on what is a good thing to do, and because of that, that's how the world kind of works. A lot of people mean well, but everyone kind of clashes, and it leads to very weird things. So I want to talk, first of all here, because it comes up every single time people come to my house. I like to bring this up as a fun little, joke about, I guess being a bad person, because it's fun to joke in that way. Again, everyone can have humor about things that they aren't. I'd like that to be known. But recently, especially in the UK, there was this big BBC thing about how many, animals are dying just because of plastic straws alone. So there's been this huge switch, all of a sudden, to, having paper straws. Plastic straws look like they're going to be banned super, super soon. So one of the things I did is I bought a bunch of plastic straws just before they've been banned. Because, again, at some point soon, maybe as this video goes live, they've been banned in the UK, and everyone's going to start using paper straws, which suck, in my opinion. I think it's great that everyone else is using paper straws, but personally, I think, these plastic straws, the marginal benefit of me using one plastic straw and getting an actual, consistent straw as opposed to having to go through 3 or 4 of the paper ones, because if you've never used a paper straw, I think it might be like a cardboard straw. I don't know what they're made of, but they're in a few places in the UK now. If you've never used one of those, then they just suck, because guess what? When you have water or any other liquid going through paper, it eventually disintegrates it, and you have to get another one, or you just give up and you just start like sipping it through it like it's a tiny gap in a hole. It's terrible. Basically, what I'm saying here is the paper straws suck, and I bought a bunch of plastic straws, and it's a funny kind of thing that like, oh, I say that's a thing, but I think almost I like to do it as a point of raising just how bad something is. I think satire is a good way to raise the point, and I also think that the marginal, again, like cost of me using all of the plastic straws I have, that's going to last me like probably the next 5 years or something. The amount of plastic in this total thing is probably not enough to affect any individual part of the ocean. I think when you're using billions of straws as a culture, that's a bad thing. When you use, 500 straws as a person, it's not a bad thing. And since, you can use it as a way to raise fun jokes, and because to me the marginal, like, again, happiness versus trade-off, whatever, I think to me it's not a bad thing to use that, but I think to some people it's like, oh, that terrible thing. But I think that's what I'm kind of trying to raise here with, like, everyone has different conflicting goals, and I think there's so many big examples of things where people do the thing that feels good because it comes up as the easiest. A lot of people will try to manipulate your feeling of what feels good, because even though, like, to bring this plastic straw issue up, I think it's a good thing that it's happened. I think it's a good thing that this came into the world, but it's kind of sad that the only reason that things get so big that they get done, the only reason there's huge changes to how straws are used in the UK is because of, the fact that, like, oh, it became a big social viral phenomenon. There are so many worse things in the world, right, that just didn't catch on, that didn't become viral, that didn't become everyone's, like, collective, let's be good people and do that sort of thing. And it's something that really bothers me in the world when you think about it, because there, clearly there are good things that need to be done. How do we work out which ones to do or who does them or whatever? Well, you can't really. And I think, on the surface, that sounds like a depressing, like, I'm trying to be nihilistic here and be like, just don't do anything ever again. Mug your neighbor, steal their cat, and then, I don't know, like, poop on their lawn or something. Like, what does it matter in the end? But that's not actually the point I'm trying to raise here. The point I'm just trying to raise is that because everyone has these different goals, there is kind of like two tasks you can actually have in, like, making the world a better place if you want to, and one of those is to try and, I guess, raise issues if you want to, and one of those is to just vaguely support the things that are already good. And I think everyone has that nature inside them where they vaguely support the things that are good already, right? Like, if I said to you, how about we go burn down a orphanage? You'd be like, no, Toycat, you can't burn down orphanages, that's bad, there are orphans in there, and, whatever else. You wouldn't just be like, well, I mean, on the one hand, burning down orphanages is bad, but on the other hand, I mean, you do have an itching to burn something down, so it might as well be an orphanage. No, everyone kind of has the instinct inside them, but I think the truth is that instinct, because it's so easily driven, you kind of need, like, a way for everyone to kind of contribute to the issues that is driven towards, right? So I had this big idea. It's a terrible, terrible idea, but I had this idea regardless. Why not have, like, a form of social media, I don't know what you call it, but have it just dedicated to, like, every single issue in the world, every single problem that is ever faced by anyone ever, and put them all on there. Like, if your cat has gone missing, put it on the website. If you think that there's a genocide happening in Myanmar, put that on the website too. You put all of these separate issues all side by side, like, stolen cat, genocide. You could just have a huge website of every grievance you have in the world, because obviously there's a legal system, but, like, it doesn't necessarily cross international boundaries, and obviously there are some things that are outside of that. So all of these things that aren't covered by some system already, put them on a website and let people vote for them. And I feel like if you wanted to make the system even better, you could have something like, oh yeah, well, if you throw a certain amount of money at the campaign, we'll give you, like, 5 votes, and then in exchange we can use that money to, like, I don't know, like, do something for the campaign, like put up a poster for his lost cat. I know, stuff like that. Like, have a system where you could have everyone, like, democratically decide on what are the good things we should do as a society. But then I think at some point you just start to, like, build up what is essentially a government, and then you can kind of see where things go wrong along the way. I think the truth behind any idea like that is you can always have great ideas, but I think the practice of, like, having individuals with limited time is you're always going to end up with issues for it. So first of all, I think the fact is that, like, no matter what sort of website you try to build that's like that, people aren't going to do it based on justice. They'll do it based on, like, some being told to, or they'll do it based on, like, some basic emotion being hit. Like, maybe Gary's cat would have more upvotes than the genocide in whatever country we said. So I think some of the reason behind that is because the loss of one life is a tragedy and the loss of 1 million is a statistic. That's a famous Starling quote, by the way. Killed lots of people, fun fact. But yeah, so I think, if you try to like ever quantify out like being good, it never kind of works. So it really just comes down to like, well, we can't tell people how to be better. We can't work out a system for it. So the truth is you just kind of have to like vaguely guide people with these social principles, which is why people don't steal from people. If you live in a fairly Western country or a high income country, or I think like a lot of countries in the world, like the vast majority, stealing isn't a thing that's done because it's really, really frowned upon. And if you live in the other countries, the ones that aren't high income or aren't in the West, then even though stealing is done slightly more often, there are serious punishments. Like you get your hands marked forever, or there are even some countries where you get your hand chopped off forever. And I think it's really interesting that we all have kind of this like collective way of solving really big problems. And the thing that made me think when I was like, okay, so how do you make people be better? Well, you can't make people be better, and we already kind of have systems that slowly evolve over time that kind of do that for you. Like also all it takes is for someone to care about one issue to then kind of like infect people with that same kind of thought, that same idea, send the idea out everywhere, and if people agree with it, then it works. And it's kind of like if you've ever looked into Bitcoin, how it works, where it's like, oh, it's distributed like money, where it goes around everywhere and then somehow comes back and it's somehow secure. It's basically the same idea, like or like a torrent, like you're downloading it from 50 other people. It's like that with ideas, where like, oh yeah, an idea kind of vaguely spreads, and then eventually enough people believe it that something gets done. And I like that this has happened over thousands of years of humanity, and that so many of the ideas that we know to this day, like, oh yeah, guess what? You say hello to people to, prove that you're both, normal people that aren't going to murder each other. Because especially in the countryside where you see one person a day, you all say hello to each other. It's just like a proof, like, oh look, we're friendly. We're not going to sneak around your house in the night and kill you. Isn't that wonderful? Think about the fact that like, oh yeah, the way people shake hands to prove they don't have weapons in their hands. That's the reason why shaking your hands is such a greeting. It's like look, we're friendly here, no weapons involved because we have our hands on each other. There's a lot of tiny things that have evolved over all this time, and I think it's kind of cool. And I think, basically, if you ever try to think about the idea of, like, how do we make humanity better, I think it's getting better all the time. I think a lot of, especially, if you look at, like, news, again, like, news, generally speaking, has to scare you, or has to shock you, or has to try and make you think that things aren't going well. Because, think about what the news is. Like, okay, so there are 65 million people roughly living in the United Kingdom, and if one person dies who is notable, then that is the noble story. It's not, the headline is not 64.999 million people live today, it's that one person died. If you think about, the fact that millions and millions of ships go around the world from China to the UK, it's, it's never reported on. It's just a normal, recurring, regular event. Until one of them sinks, or one of them has difficulties, or one of them gets trapped somewhere or gets involved in a dispute, then it becomes huge news. And that's, I get why that is in a lot of cases, but it means that you only hear about the rare, shocking events, and if you spend a lot of time tuning into those rare, shocking events, because news knows that you don't only like, rare, shocking events are great, but what about ones that can change your worldview and make you need to come back? And when you think the world is getting worse, you're like, I need to keep checking this news, because I need to stay up to date with how bad it's getting. Well, then you get like a kind of negative feedback cycle, and that is why you might think the world is getting worse all the time, but the truth is, these little systems that we have, they're always evolving over time, things are always getting better, the world as a whole, because of a billion reasons, is getting better every single day, and all you have to do to make that tick on, I think, is never to abandon it and say the world's bad, so I'm going to get bad too, is just to be like, actually, world's going pretty okay, or even if you think it's going badly, I'm going to try and do my little bit and make things different. I'm not going to drink from plastic straws. I drink from plastic straws because I think they're good anyway, but I mean, you gotta be like, I'm gonna take a stand and I'm gonna help this person out, and just doing all those tiny things. Like I try to. I live most of my life in a city, and cities, there's so much. It's that whole country city divide. In the countryside, you say hello to every person because they might murder you otherwise, and in the city, you make sure you never say hello to anyone because that's serial killer stuff. The person who says hello to you in the city, he's the guy who's gonna murder you because that's just the weird divergence there. But because of that, a lot of your time is spent not talking to people and just trying not to get in each other's way. But sometimes I try my best to like do tiny gestures that make people's days just a little bit better because it's not too much. And it really annoys me when people don't try to do the same thing, because we're all trying not to cross paths here, but why not try and do active things to do that? So for instance, like if you're sat on a train or sat on anything like that, people, or a bus even, people try their hardest to sit by themselves. It's a fun thing. I like it because I don't want to sit near someone if possible. But then as soon as like, the bus is full, all of the, half the bus is full, so everyone's everyone's sitting by themselves, people want to come join and they want to sit in too. So it's like, okay, go sit with someone else so these people can at least sit together. It's small stuff like that, where it's like, if you're only there for 10 minutes, why not try and help someone out? I've actually done this by accident once too. Like, there was 4 seats at like the ice cream place I was at, and I got up because I wanted to like read something, and then I saw there was a family coming past, and like, like 4 of them to sit down and wait for something, and I was like, oh, remain standing up. Look how polite I am, because they said like, thanks to me, like just as I was like realizing what I did, and I was like, oh yeah, no, this is totally me. And I think honestly, I would go as far as to say that if you want to be a good person, you want to feel good, you want to improve society in some way, I would say take credit for the stuff you don't even do, because if you feel like you're a better person, I think you'll try to do good things. I think the people who have been downtrodden by the world, who feel like, once you steal once, for instance, again, go back to that, because that's a universal bad thing. I know I'm talking about stealing a lot because of the whole phone thing, but I swear it's just something that's been on my mind a lot, because when you look into how, stealing is reported by the police, even in, real countries, like the one you live in right now, the one I live in, the way it works is like you report that something's been stolen, they put it on a list, and then, if it comes up, they'll give it back to you. But they don't do any like investigating, or they don't look for it. They don't even check CCTV. It's just like, well, I mean, we'll hope that it comes up in some other random investigation. But yeah, even if we leave that to the side, because I really want to raise awareness of that fact. I'm not sure why, but it's something that's obvious, but that you don't think about. And if you haven't ever thought about it, then guess what? Like, if something, you can't have insurance or have your own like personal pool of like money to replace stuff, or when you lose something, just like be like, well, it's gone now, it's gone somewhere else. But either way, the point I'm trying to raise with all this is that if you steal something at some point in your life, and you become one of those people that gets outcast, say you're in one of those countries where they literally chop off your hand or they mark a thing on it, then forever you'll feel like one of the bad people. You'll feel like a bad person in your mind, and especially I think murderers, and there's a lot of prison systems around the world which reinforce this point of like, you're a bad person, that's why we put you in this place. But I think the truth is that like, if you think you're if the world tells you're a bad person enough, you'll think you're a bad person too. And I think that kind of drives things forwards, and it's why a lot of things happen. And it makes me really wonder, because again, the whole world, the whole system we have is based on like, guess what, there are a bunch of things you don't do, not only because it's shamed upon by society, but also because if you do something like stealing, or you do something like you assault someone, you really badly hurt them, you take away some quality of their life, then you go to the prison where you'll be locked away. It's terrible. There's all the terrible movies about it, and basically you don't want to go to prison. Society reinforces that for you, and therefore when you do one of those bad things, you go there. And I think this is actually one of the crux points of like the confusion and the big gap between, I would say this is one of the biggest continual struggles you see all over the world on a billion different issues, especially it comes up more and more these days, I feel like, is that the fact that like, if someone hasn't done a crime yet and you want to stop them doing the crime, the best way is to tell them really bad things will happen and we will catch you. If you tell them those two things, they hopefully won't do it. That has some effect on them. You need, for society to function, people to know that not only, if I want to do those things, it won't happen, but if other people want to do those things, it'll happen to them. It would make you feel so much better if you lost your phone, knowing that like, there is a 15% chance that guy goes away for some amount of time. Or I feel like it does for some people, like based on my loose understanding. So basically we need to have a system where everyone thinks that will happen to people who do a bad thing, but also where once it happens to people, you need to encourage them that they're good people, and you need to try not to punish them more than you need to like you need to fix them in some way. And I think that is actually, again, that's the heart of every single big issue in a lot of ways that comes up today. And I think that kind of whole debate thing is why in a lot of religions there's something called forgiveness. I'm always confused as to what it's called, because I think it's called different things in different countries, but the basic concept of like confession in Catholicism, which by the way, fun fact, I'm technically a Catholic on a very technical level, because I think like once you go through a certain number of processes, you're like on the list, and now I'm signed up for heaven. And that means that when obviously whole like those gates come up and there's like a bouncer at the door, like, oh, you're not on the list, guess you have to take the downstairs and get back on the street. I'm gonna be like, look, I'm on the list, I did this thing those years ago. But one of the parts of becoming becoming a Catholic, or becoming, again, it's probably a lot of religions too, is you've got to confess every single sin, and then for the rest of your life, as long as you say what you did wrong to someone else, and you say that you want to be better, then they will say you are better. And I think there's something interesting about that idea, because I think it's necessary. I think it goes back to my point of like, I accidentally reached this, well, again, I was just thinking on the train, and I was like, yeah, you need everyone to think that they're a good person, so that they'll do good person things. Counterintuitively, you might figure that you want people to do good person thinks so that they'll become a good person, but you really want it the other way around. And the best way to do that is to try and forgive people when they do bad things. You've got to have a system where everyone can be reset back to being a good person. And this is where my second genius idea, today I'm talking about morality and some stuff, so I'm going to really offend some people. Sorry about that, by the way. This is just like how my brain's been reacting. But this is also business ideas revolving around morality, so that's genius right there. Here's an idea for an app, right? It's something that can track your life as a whole. I guess once we have more advanced phones that keep more and more of our privacy, and every single time you do something bad, you lose a point. Every single time you do something good, you gain a point. And after a certain number of points in either direction, the system starts to warn you, like, oh, once you hit -5, you are no longer allowed into these places. And, there's a certain list of places around the world where, like, oh yeah, they only accept people who are +5 and above, because they only want good people, nice, wholesome people. And then at like -15 or something, it's like, oh, and because this system is mandated, actually, I've made creepy Skynet, but we're going to keep rolling with the idea. At -15, they start to take some money away from you, like a small amount, like £1 a week, and that's going to go towards, be shared amongst the people who do the best. If you have a system like that in place, I guess to have it be voluntary, you have to make it a lot weaker. But if you make it forced on everyone, because guess what? I'm dictator Toycat, I'm supreme leader, I'm forcing this system on everyone's phone and you have to keep it on all the time, then suddenly you can have everyone be like trying to outdo each other at being good, which either sounds like it's the most terrifying thing in the world, because if you're trying to be good just to get points, are you still being good? I don't even know. Or it sounds like a way to make utopia. So boom, there's 2 app ideas for you. And since every good thing comes in threes. It's a well-known fact, rule of threes. It's a famous writing rule. If you've never learned it, right now, say things in threes. Like try and describe this episode right now in threes. It's really interesting. It's really eye-opening, and I think Toycat might be a psychopath. You say those things in threes and it's like, oh yeah, that is nice. So pro tip for you, literary rule, say things in threes, makes things sound nice and rhymey, like, oh, I'm really tall, small, and a ball. I mean, obviously, if the 3 things match or, like, work together, like, I'm really fun, and now I'm done, and it's bad news because I have a gun, something like that, probably. This is getting pretty dark. We should probably move on. But anyway, so I want to just kind of move on from all of that and say, the key thing that I always take from every discussion I have in my head, like this one, which again, somehow ends up in, like, the serious life issues, is that I think everything in life needs balance. And I know I'm sounding like Thanos, like, first I go on a crazy rant about how, maybe we should, like, take money away from people who are bad, and now we've got the whole thing of, like, oh yeah, well, there should be balance in the universe. But I really think everything in life is about balance. There's a bunch of, like, there's sliders that you have as an individual. If you're a sim, let's imagine, like, oh yeah, you have an energy bar, and you have a fun bar, and you have a, hungry bar, and it's like, you gotta keep the bars all fulfilled. And then I think as a society, we have a bunch of, like, like left to right bars going on that are like, oh yeah, how do we feel about this issue? And I think every single big issue in the world that I care about, or every single big issue again, even the ones that I feel most strongly for, even if there's something I feel like should be going all the way in one direction, I think the best way for everything to be is always somewhere in the balance. I think on every crazy viewpoint you can have 2 kind of opinions on, the best opinion is always somewhere in the center. The realistic one, the compromise that makes most people happy, is always going to be somewhere between those 2 bigger ideas. And I'm trying to think of like a big issue to easily mention this one. The immediate one that comes to mind is obviously the whole feminism thing, but that's like a big no, do not discuss that on the internet. So let's get another like kind of controversial, like still gets a lot of people prepped up kind of thing. So let's talk a little bit about climate change, right? Because there's 2 big views on both sides. There's the view of like, this isn't real, and therefore we should not change anything we're doing, because why change what you're doing for fake? Or this is, caused naturally and it's not going to change or anything. And then the other opinion is that like, we are killing the planet so fast, in 20 years, there will be ocean all the way up to the mountains in Colorado. Or so, some magic like that. People always have these wildly diametrically opposed opinions, and it's like, well, there's clearly no middle ground between that, right? Or maybe there is. Maybe we say, okay, there's a chance this is naturally occurring, but there's also proof that we're doing something towards it. Or, I'm not trying to like raise any opinions here. I don't actually have wild opinions on climate change. All I'll say is that when I was a kid, I watched The Day After Tomorrow, I think it's called that. It's a movie about, I guess, like, exaggerated climate change, and, like, all of New York floods, and, like, they're trapped in a library and they almost die. It's, like, as a kid, that movie messed me up. I spent, like, years of my life waking up being like, oh, is there a flood now? Because I couldn't swim as a kid. I still can barely swim. I can vaguely float now as an adult, But, if the water level rises, I live in like a dip part of the UK, so I just die instantly. If the water level goes up like enough, meters, then all of a sudden I'm trapped on my roof or I'm dead. One of the two things, right? I guess I could like hop on a raft or like a floating car or something like that. But my point here is that that's all my opinions on this. I don't have wild opinions on climate change at all, but I just wanted to say that like there's the two crazy spectrums of like, let's change everything, let's go back to never putting any coal in the atmosphere, and the other opinion is let's not change anything from how it is right now. And maybe instead of obsessing over the two viewpoints, which are, it's always done all the time, why not have an opinion of like, okay, so clearly something's going on and this and that, and like I feel like this is true for every single big issue in the world, where it's like, okay, so what if in the world there's a bunch of like people who have lots of money and there's a bunch of people who don't have lots of money, and then some people are like, what if we shared it all equally? What if literally everything went to everyone all the time? There's the radical all the way down there thoughts. Then there's thoughts that are more like, what if we, like made all the poor pay the taxes, go back to like a serfdom system, like a peasantry class thing? Wouldn't that be wonderful? And it's like, rather than ever discussing either of those ideas seriously, because we know that they're like grossly, hugely offensive, I think whenever you allow things to get to like the really crazy edges, that's when the stuff goes wrong. Because I think even Hitler thought he was being a good person. I think, this is going off the rails. I think if we go too far on this one, we're gonna end up offending everyone somehow, because a lot of people are gonna be like, whoa, I know you said he thinks he's a good person, but the fact that you're implying Hitler's a good person is terrible. And then there's gonna be those people that are like, actually Hitler was a good person, he did some good things. It's like, no, let's just chill, let's have a discussion, that's how everything should be. Let's just talk, let's just say, okay, he thought he was everyone in history, I feel like, has thought they were doing good things. I think there are very few exceptions. You can always see them in history too, that the big exceptions to history that are just like, oh yeah, there's this French guy that just decided to kill all of his sisters and like horrifically torture them. Okay, that guy's crazy. But someone who's just like, oh, this is the leader of another country, he just had really wacky personal views and was able to share them with other people. And that's why I think having more people at least advocate for somewhere close to the middle has a better impact for your opinion on the thing. Because, okay, this is something I've always thought about. It's like, this is like paranoid conspiracy Toycat at this point. But if you wanted to so if there's a big discussion going on in the world, because there's always a billion discussions, right? Because the world, especially I think like in post-Trump world or whatever, the world is always way more political. I don't think I like it. Maybe I'm just an adult now and that's why I say it. But I don't like that it's always going that way. But when these huge issues come up, I think the smartest thing you could do if you were a part of it, because again, now like the internet decides how a lot of these issues are raised, the smartest thing you can do is advocate for the furthest to the wrong side of the argument opinion. Like if you were scared that like, again, let's say you are scared that for whatever reason that like, we're acting a bit too much on climate change, whatever, like details of the Paris Agreement or whatever you don't like, you're like, actually, yeah, I don't like that. I think we should undo that. I think the smartest thing to do is to either publicly, like let's say you're just a random person, or privately try and advocate as hard as you can for like, what if we went back to the Stone Age? There is nothing that can be produced using oil or machines, and then try and get that movement going. Because I think there's a lot of people who could get around that. I think any idea can be sold to people in the right way. I think if you say to people enough, like, how about we go back to the Stone Age? There's if you look at like charts, and there's, I'm going to try right now and convince you, let's go back to the Stone Age. Because if you look at any chart of like happiness over time, people are way happier if you're just farming cows. Like if you look at Amish people in Pennsylvania, they don't use like washing machines or cars or telephones or smartphones. They don't use any of this stuff, and their average happiness levels are so much higher. There's something. The problem with modern life is it's so complex, and all this complexity comes off slowly killing the environment. So if we go back to the Stone Age, we go back to just like having our small little tribes and then not dealing with anything else, then wouldn't life be so much better? Let's all go there. Let's go to the Stone Age. No oil, nothing like that. Just all, gathered around the campfire at night. I guess we can keep our houses because they're there, but we're not going to build any new houses, any new anything. We're all just going to be hunter-gatherers from now on, and because of that, there's no more wars. Guess what? There's no reason for, what wars are actually going on in the world right now? Like, whatever, Middle East, something. If everyone there was a hunter-gatherer living their own little tribe, then they wouldn't have to worry about these whole border issues. And, North Korea, everyone's a hunter-gatherer, doesn't have to worry about South Korea. It's just like, I feel like, there you go. I've just fixed the world, and all we have to do is convince everyone to go back to using stone tools. And maybe you're just, like, listening to that and you're going, Toycat, I think you've gone insane. I think you need to chill on whatever crazy drugs you're taking. But I think there's a part, I think it's somewhat, like, it's reasonable to try and convince people of stuff like that, because everyone wants to listen to ideas, everyone wants to know stuff, so all you have to do is advocate as hard as you can for that, get a bunch of people. You can't obviously convince everyone, but get like thousands of people to be like, yes, Stone Age, Stone Age, Stone Age. Get them to be crazy in favor of your idea, and then people who have never been exposed to it, because, you know, you're really good at selling people on your idea, or at least selling a small subset of people on your idea. Let's say, you know, like preppers in America, for instance, they're down with this, they're like, yeah, I could live in a society like that. So once you get a bunch of people convinced, then those people are going to start telling other people, and when, you know, like someone on the street tells you, I think we should go back to the Stone Age, you're like, that's crazy. When you learn it's a popular idea, you want to go as hard as you can the opposite direction. You are repulsed by that idea, and if you then attach that idea, again, if you're really clever, you can attach that idea to some other ideas from someone pretty famous, because let's say you can reach all of their supporters, and you get them to be on board, like in principle, they're like, I kind of like this, and then suddenly like the whole world's like, oh my god, this guy wants to take us back to the Stone Age. I think that is the smartest way to push something. Like, to be extreme on the wrong side of something is the best way to push something towards the other side, and there's something really worrying about that, because it does work so well. Once you hear something really extreme, you want to stay away from it. You fear it a little bit more than anything else, and because there's this, there's like a human, I'd say it's a fault in the human programming. One of my favorite things is to point out, like, well, here's an issue of like the way we're all programmed, and one of the biggest issues of the way that we're all set up is that we fear losses more than we value gains. It's called loss aversion theory. Basically, if someone says, okay, here is, we're gonna roll a dice, and if you get a 6, I'll give you $100, but if we don't get a 6, I'm going to take $10 from you. It's an objectively smart move to do that, because, again, every 6th time you'll get the 6 and you'll make some money, and the other 5 times you'll lose money, but like over time, you'd make a bunch of money. But everyone's like, oh no, I can't afford to lose 10. I'm probably going to lose 10, and that's bad for me, so I'm not going to take your bet, Mr. Stranger Man, which, by the way, never take that bet of a stranger. But the idea that people are scared of losses, if you say to someone like, okay, so there's a 50% chance you'll get a job that pays double as much as your current one, you'd say no, because, well, I mean, I've got to look after my family, my kids, or even just got to look after myself, my cat. And because that applies to everyone, there's a whole bunch of like really interesting ways to kind of like use that to have things that go against that be in a different way. And I think it's kind of a good thing. I think it's something we should accept as just like, I don't think we should try and fix it, because there's no way to, like, loss aversion in terms of money is easy enough to fix, but I think in terms of security, we should always value how much effort it takes for the modern world to work. I think enough people don't appreciate this. So again, I took a train to go to Five Guys. It's like a short train, like a 15-20 minute journey. I hop on a train, and you know, this is a magic, like, huge snake that rolls along the ground at something like 115 miles an hour. It's a fast train where I live. So, you know, it's this huge snake. It's got something like 600 people on it, and it stops at regular intervals so that people can get off and do their thing. So I get on this huge snake. It takes me to my destination. I get out. There's a clever system that determines I paid some portion of the costs that get that train running, and you know, the magic system decides that my ticket is valid. It lets me out, and then I have to, you know, walk over to a Five Guys where they've got a bunch of like delivered that day pieces of meat. Someone killed the meat like 2 days ago, and then they delivered it today, and as well as some potatoes that are fresh delivered from the other side of the country today, and then they chop those up in the right way. I give them a small amount of money, but they sell enough that it can be that cheap. There's so many complex things that make every single part of society work. And I think one of the things that I would advocate for at the end of this video, because I've been really wish-washy this whole time, I've just been like, you know, it's interesting that people have conflicts on this and that, and the best way to like something would be to go really extreme on something. But I think one of the few things that I genuinely really believe is that society is really complex, and we need to be careful of that. There is a thing that has happened time and time again. It's called, I think, systems collapse, where if you make systems too complex and then people get used to them and then just assume they can't collapse, eventually it will collapse, right? I think one of the big fears of the modern world is that could happen. And although it's less likely to happen because the world is kind of globalized now, and it's harder for any, like, you know, to have an invading force ruin that. I think one of the things that would really help the world is if everyone realizes on a constant basis how much and how good some things are. Even the bad things in life, the amount of like effort that goes into them, even the things that you want to improve, you should appreciate that right now the position is still actually pretty good, you know, like even some of the worst things that I hate on a daily basis. Like I might complain that a train is delayed. The fact that there are these magic ground snakes going every, you know, like 6 or 8 minutes or something throughout London, which, by the way, 8 million people living in a really small amount of space, that is wild. The fact that as I'm recording this video, I have somehow managed to go to the entire opposite side of the earth to which I was born and to which I live most of my life, and I'm doing something I hope that is fun. I think I might be vlogging it, so maybe you know what I'm doing better than I know what I'm doing. But there's so many cool things in everyone's life, even the day-to-day of like, today as I record this, again, Five Guys, so wonderful. And even if you don't go to Five Guys, even just like the fact that it's really easy to do a lot of stuff. Like you can change you as a human pretty easily. There is an infinite amount of knowledge out there, so you can become a smarter person today if you want to. If you want to, get in shape, if you value physical fitness the most, because we have all these things set up, like buying, like protein or whatever, pretty easy. But doing exercise and fitting it into your life, pretty easy. It's just like, I mean, it's hard because no one wants to do it in the moment. But I think one of the things that there's no way to say this without trying to be one of those people that's like, oh, everyone should appreciate things, is like, I think the complexity of the world should be appreciated. Even if you don't appreciate how things are right now, even if you want things to be better, I think we should always come back to the same. I think the one collective thing that everyone should kind of share is that, yeah, getting here is like a cool thing. It's hard to imagine how humans came into the universe to begin with, right? Like, it's hard to imagine the universe coming from nothing and then existing. That there's no way to even really conceptualize that, right? So there was nothing, and then there was next to nothing, and then there was something, and then there was everything. That's what we currently understand the universe to be. I think in like a million years we'll know a lot better, but right now that's all we understand about the world. That's impossible to conceptualize. And then somehow from all these, huge rocks flying around the universe and hitting into each other, somehow one of those rocks eventually met the conditions for some tiny life cells to develop. Then those tiny life cells somehow came into like pre-human forms. Then those pre-humans eventually evolved into humans. Then those humans did so many tiny things over all these years that shaped everything that you're doing in this moment. The fact, the fact that you need to be entertained in the evening, because I'm assuming you're watching this late in your day or playing your games. The fact that you shake hands when you meet someone, this really old evolved thing. The fact that, you eat like, roughly 3 meals a day. The fact that, all these different things that we have to this day had to come from all those little things. And I think it's weird that, like, we're still building that as we go forwards. A lot of people think that to build something, you have to do it all at once. Like, if to get something great done, has to be done the next 5 years. A lot of, especially on the political cycle, right? Everything has to be done now, soon, in the future. But I think the truth that everyone should accept more is like, things take time sometimes. Especially the very best things, the things that stick around the longest, are the things that slowly take place. And rather than being like, let's flip the system and then a minute later be like this, I think having slow, subtle changes, tries not to upset the balance too much. You can see if things are going bad and then fix it midway through, rather than like, oh, well, we decided to just get rid of animals because we decided there'd be less suffering that way, and as it turns out, they produced some gas that we didn't know about till just now, and now everyone's dying at a crazy rate. Imagine if, say, we get rid of all the plastic straws in the world, and then it turns out the paper straws are 1,000 times worse because they build up at the bottom of the ocean, and it's causing sea levels to rise and ocean temperatures to go down. Well, in that case, you'd be glad that you slowly switched to plastic straws, and someone like me, Mr. bought up the plastic straws in the world, I would be a savior, and that was my point with all of this rant. I hope you all enjoyed today's video. Give it a like if you liked it, give it a share if you liked it. Let me know what you think of the whole Toycat podcast style thing, because I really appreciate like the support. If you listened to this for the first time, let me know on Twitter, because I find that interesting. And also, before you go, because the reason I don't do these more often, even though I enjoy them, even though I know a fair number of you enjoy them, is because it doesn't necessarily make financial sense. YouTube really hates long-form videos like this, and you can easily tell that looking at the view counter. Like, especially when you're talking about serious or interesting or the big issues or whatever, you can't, like, attract an audience that way. It's just not the way that YouTube works, at least as far as I can tell. So, basically, if you want to see more of these, what I recommend, and what I always recommend, is I could be like, oh yeah, so here's my Patreon, go check it out. And I'm not really a Patreon guy. I think as long as I don't need a Patreon, I'm going to try not to have one. But a couple of things I do recommend is, first of all, getting a YouTube gaming sponsorship. I know a few people have done it last time. It's a good way to support the channel with a consistent monthly revenue, and it means that instead of like, the high view videos being important because they literally, pay my rent, or it's actually a mortgage, but they pay, for my living costs or whatever. So the sponsorship allows me to be focused on the people rather than the masses, which I think, maybe you think that has benefits. It's something only you can say, right? And then the other thing is Flattr. So flattr.com/IBXToycat. I'll link it down below. I'll probably forget to link it down below. So www.flattr, as in like without the E, .com/@IBXToycat. I really hope I link it, but if I don't, I'm sorry. I'm a terrible person. You deserve to ignore the rest of this for that. But no, I really like recommending Flattr because it's a way to fix the, I guess, the monetization of the internet as a whole. You know, the fact that, like, you know, quantity is valued more than quality, but you can fix it not just for my channel, because, you know, if I said, give me $10, that's great. You know, you're helping me personally, but it's a way to help a lot of the things you like on the internet, because you do a monthly subscription to the internet. You do it to everything you watch, and then you can pick, you know, which people that you watch or which content that you like gets a part of that. So you could be like, yeah, I want to flatter this, and then that sends the direct signal that, like, you liked it this much. And I think because it's subscription based and it's regular, I think it has a lot of benefits, different systems. And then also you can use it for other people. You can be like, I like this guy, I'll flatter his stuff this much. And I think just because it's one, it's new, so I like trying to support something that's new out there and trying to make the internet a better place. But also I think the fact that it allows you to support not only one person, the person telling you about it, because obviously it's in my interest to say, actually, just give me the money instead. Just send me $10 via PayPal. Does that sound good? Yeah, just give me the money. It'll make things better. I'll use it on something New Zealandish. But I like trying to, I like feeling like I'm making the internet thing a bit better. And if you like that feeling too, flattr.com/IPXToycat. Because if you use that, full disclosure, I think if you use it for 3 months in a row with a $10 fee, I think they give me $10 as a bonus, so you effectively get $40 worth for your first 3 months of $10, so $40 for $30, and you get to support stuff with that too. Isn't that wonderful? I think so. But anyway, hope you all enjoyed the video, because I'll see you all in the next podcasty style thing, in whenever that happens. So thank you very much for watching. Goodbye.